Hi guys, Mark Dawes NFPS Limited here, and this video is going to be about knife defense training and knife awareness courses, and I'm doing this video fundamentally because I've been asked to. So a bit of a health warning for you. I'm not out to offend anyone or upset anyone, but people have come to me by email and on Facebook messages saying, would I actually go public and give my opinion on these knife defense training courses? So that's what I intend to do. The other reason I'm doing this was I actually watched an interview the other day on Breakfast TV with a doorman called Ozzie Gandaa, and he gave a very honest and open and heartwarming talk about the incident that happened at Southwark and how he was involved with that and how he helped people. And if you haven't seen that, then Google it. I'll probably put a link below this video so you can actually look at it, because he comes at it not just from a moral and ethical point of view, but also from how it affected him, because there's a human factor story here that we need to look at. And this is the purpose of this video, because I want to look at it from a number of aspects. But fundamentally, I want to get this point over. If we are running knife defense, or we're offering knife defense training workshops where we're going to teach people how to take blades off people, then there are fundamental risks in what we're asking and probably expecting people to do. So that's where I'm going with this, guys. So like I said, health warning. I don't mean to offend and upset anyone, but I want to get some facts straight out there. Okay, let's first and foremost look at the law. So what does the law say about what we can do if we are going to be attacked with someone with a knife? Well, I'll cut to the chase. You know, a knife situation is not necessarily a self-defense situation. It is a survival situation, and you can kill with intent. Yep, you heard that right. If someone's attacking you with a knife and you believe your life is in danger, you can kill with intent. And Article 2 of the Human Rights Act protects you from that. It doesn't mean you won't be charged or investigated, but it's a hell of a defence there for you. And there are numerous cases out there, and if you search our blog post on the website, you can see loads and loads of cases where people have actually defended themselves against people with knives, actually killed the person who was trying to attack them, and they've not been prosecuted and found guilty of any offence. In fact, if you want some facts on this, there was a 15-year trawl. 20 million cases were looked at over a 15-year period. And out of those 20 million cases, only 11 people were found guilty of using excessive force. So in extreme cases where someone is coming at you with a knife, if you want to use force, if you feel you have no choice but to use force, then you can technically take a life to protect a life, and you've done nothing wrong. Okay, now having said that, let's get back to a point here where we're asking people to actually do that. Because if we are going to be training people in knife defense stuff, taking knives off people, then there's some other facts we need to be aware of too. Now, Peter Boatman, who sadly long passed, did a lot of work and a lot of research on this. And Pete actually came up with some quite frightening statistics. Now, I can't relate to whether these are current right now, so please do your own due diligence and research. But basically, what he found was that the average stab depth of a blade in the UK was 8 to 12 centimetres. That goes in a long way. That's a deep wound. Also, 3 centimetres of blade, if it penetrated your body from the rear, it could actually penetrate your lung and your spleen, and you will die. You'll basically drown in your own blood. And if 4 centimetres of blade went through your chest wall cavity, that's all it took to hit your heart, and you'll die where you fall unless you get life-saving an operation at that moment in time. The other thing is the most common wound causing death isn't multiple stab wounds, it's a single stab wound. Now, like I've said, Pete Boatman, who's now sadly passed, did a lot of work on this stuff, so please do check these statistics for yourself. But fundamentally, let's get back to the context of this. Expecting someone to take a knife off someone and training someone to do so is putting them in a life-threatening situation. So let's look at the health and safety aspects on this. If you're an employer, so let's say you work in the nighttime economy, for example, just as there was the incident in Southwark the other day, and someone comes into your venue or tries to gain access to your venue, what are your staff expected to do? Are they expected to engage the person with a knife to actually protect other people, thus putting themselves at risk, or not? Well, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, Section 2, you have a duty of care to your staff, and Section 3, you have a duty of care to others. So you do have to have a risk contingency plan in place. So you do want to start looking at what your plans are going to be. So you want to have these plans in place. That requires a risk assessment. Now, one of the management regulations that underpins the Health and Safety at Work Act, which means if you comply with this regulation, you're complying with the Act, is Regulation 8 brackets 2. And what this regulation basically says is that if staff are exposed to serious and imminent danger, and let's get this right, someone with a knife is a serious and imminent threat, they can stop work and proceed to a place of safety and refuse to return whilst that threat is still there. So your staff have the same rights as everyone else. If they are exposed to someone with a knife, they can stop work, extract themselves to a place of safety, and stay there until the threat's gone. Now that raises the question, what about other people in the venue? Well, you've got a duty of care too. So your evacuation procedures, your crisis procedures, your planning for these type of contingencies must all be formulated in a risk assessment whilst actually considering the safety and welfare of your staff. Now, let's talk about some other bits and bobs. A lot of knife defence training, and I've done it and I've taught it, is taught in very clinical and aesthetic surroundings where the moves are pre-prescribed. And to be honest and to be fair, the people undertaking the training may not have the actual right motivation to want to do this. So it's easy to do this in a sterile environment. Being confronted with someone with a knife is psychologically defeating, and it's going to kick your heart rate up to a level where you're basically going to have a frontal lobe lobotomy. In other words, your cognitive part of thinking will shut down and you'll go back to your limbic system, which is your primitive brain, which is basically the brain of a dog or a puppy. Okay, that means you will not be able to actually process complex skills or recall and remember complex skills. Now, the other thing about this, and I know the argument will come in about, yeah, well, we drill and we drill and we drill and we drill. Well, you can drill and drill and drill and drill, but you need to drill in the right context and in the right real-time situations. That doesn't mean you train with real knives, by the way. Okay, let's get that one clear straight away. But the bottom line is that if the training is not realistic enough and people are not practicing it enough and are not working in those sort of environments enough, that type of training will fail. So it begs the question, if we are training people to go into situations to take knives off people, are we training them to fail? Now, that's something I just want you to consider. I'm not saying that all knife defence courses will fail. I'm saying that's something you need to consider. But what you need to think about as an employer, if you are going to engage this training, so there's an expectation on your staff that they will have to go and take knives off people who are intending to hurt and kill and maim others, you are intentionally putting your staff in a life-threatening situation. And if you're underpinning that with training, that expectation is reinforced. And like I said before, they have rights. Now, so far I've spoke about some of the legislation and I spoke about training fundamentally, but there's also equipment and kit to consider. Now, if you just consider the recent events in London, for example, the police response to someone armed with a knife was a firearms team, okay? So a firearms unit turned up and they shot and killed people armed with knives. That is the appropriate response for someone with a knife, because a knife in our society now is far more deadly than a gun, purely on the statistical evidence of the amount of people who are being stabbed and killed with knives and seriously injured, of course. So the police response, proportionate response, is a firearms team who will shoot to kill. They won't shoot to wound, they'll shoot to kill, okay? Or as they call it now, shoot to live, to be politically expedient with it. Point. When you train people, are you going to give them the kit? And the answer to that is no, you're not going to be able to give them firearms. Okay, so the next step down from firearm may be a shield, it may be a baton, it may be something else. And you've got to comply with all the legislation there. So if you are a nightclub owner, if you're working in the nighttime economy, for example, or in any industry sector now, where there is a risk of someone entering your premises with knives, with either real or dummy vests on that may look like bombs, then your whole process and your whole risk assessment, your whole contingency must take into consideration the equipment you are allowed to have and not allowed to have, and of course police response, and that means liaising with the police. Now, it doesn't mean that in exceptional circumstances you can't use something. Okay, there was an Attorney General's reference, I'll leave a link to it below this video, where in one of the riots happened in this country, a man made petrol bombs and he kept them above his shop and his flat. After the riots had ceased, the police inspected, they found these petrol bombs, they asked him why he had them, and he said, I've got them here to protect my family. If they came upstairs, I would bomb them. They arrested him and charged him with having petrol bombs. The case was thrown out of court, the man was found not guilty, because in those exceptional circumstances, where the police couldn't be seen to respond within a reasonable period of time, The judge ruled, the Attorney General's reference on this one ruled that he had the right to go to that amount of extremity to protect his family in exceptional circumstances. Now, the whole point of risk management planning is to decide where the extremes are and what you do to manage the extremes, and then exceptional falls outside the extreme. Now, the thing to bear in mind is you can't get away with saying exceptional things are happening all the time, because all that means is your extreme has shifted. So you need to revisit your risk management process, okay, your risk management planning. Well, something I'm going to be talking about at the conference on the 22nd of June is something called the universal human phobia. And the universal human phobia is the most common phobia out there. Now, the second most common phobia is snakes. So if I threw a snake into a room full of people, roughly 15% of those people would have a phobic reaction and shock to that animal. 85% wouldn't. Some would take pictures, some would want to catch the snake, others would run away, but they wouldn't necessarily have a phobic shock. If you expose someone to human aggression, they will have a phobic shock and a phobic reaction to it. A huge percentage of people, roughly 98% of humans, will have a phobic reaction, a phobic shock to someone armed with a knife, machete, or a gun. So, once again, if you're expecting your staff to do this and you're training people to do this, you are putting people into a situation, mentally, psychologically, with intent or by duress, where they're going to come out of that psychologically damaged. Okay, now let's talk about how long we have to fight. If we put someone into a situation where they're not expecting it and they're armed with a knife, then that is an anaerobic activity, which means that they are oxygen deficient. That means on average, the average person has 2 to 12 seconds to do something. After that, they are running out of oxygen, their oxygen is depleting, and lactic acid is building up in the body. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole aspect of this right now because it's a lecture in its own, but it's something we'll be touching on at the conference this year on the 22nd of June. Okay, let's summarize. If you are in a situation where someone is presenting an edged weapon, a knife, or another bladed type instrument where they are intent on taking life, then if you have to, you can actually take life to preserve life. And there are various acts of parliament and case law precedents that will cover you on that. And I'll leave a link below the video where you can read some. Okay. From a health and safety point of view, if you are training staff and there is an expectation, either direct or implied, and what that means is you've either given them the instruction they have to do it, or they believe because you haven't given them instruction they don't have to do it, which is the implied bit, that they are expected to do so, then as an employer, you are responsible for the health and safety and welfare of your staff. So you need to have risk management in place. You need to have contingency plans in place. You need to have your processes in place for extreme situations, especially in the current climate. And again, I'll leave a link below the video where you can access a document where you can find out more about that. At the end of the day, your staff have the same rights as every other human being out there. They can, by law, under the regulation I've already quoted, stop work, proceed to a place of safety, and refuse to return whilst the risk is there, and you cannot discipline them for that, and you cannot sack them for that. That is all covered in things like the Management Health and Safety Work Regulations and the Employment Rights Act. Okay. Fact of the matter is when they are presented with someone with a knife, they are presented with someone where 3 to 4 centimeters of blade will kill, a single stab wound will kill, and the average stab depth is 10 to 12 centimeters. So this is a serious, serious situation. What will happen to them psychologically and physically is they'll technically have a frontal lobe lobotomy. They will shut down their limbic system. Complex processing will actually slow down. So anything they've been taught will shut down, and they'll go back to basic primitive stress response. And you can drill and drill and drill as many complex things as you like, but you're going to shut down and go back to this basic primitive stress response. They're going to be oxygen depleted. They're going to have 2 to 12 seconds to fight, and that's about it. So the point I'm making with this video is if you are going to be offering a knife and an edge weapon defensive course, and you're going to be teaching people to take knives off people, there is implied instruction in what you're doing. Yeah? And if you're doing that as part of a company, then you need to consider all the factors I've spoke about and more. Okay, I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. Like I said, I hope I haven't offended or upset anyone, but I just wanted to get this out there to get an overview on this from where I come from, and I've been working as an expert witness in this field now for more years than I care to consider, and I do not want any of you putting yourself unnecessarily at risk where you end up in court for doing something with the right intent, but being found to do it for the wrong reasons. Okay, any comments? Leave them below. Thanks, guys.